Hi, Gabriella. We're back again. We're having this conversation, and we were kind of just chatting before we hit record about where a really good place to start would be. And we discussed very briefly this post that you put up on LinkedIn about a really positive experience that you had had of essentially being seen, right, and being heard and being understood. And I thought, well, actually, this is just a really good place because this is going to connect a whole load of things for us potentially in our conversation today.
Okay.
Why don't you start with a bit of your story that's happened this week, and let's just see where the conversation goes from there.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So yeah, I posted um it's a very simple thing. I'm of the age. I got the letter, you need to go for your first mammogram. And I had to phone up to change the date because it wasn't, they just give you a date. And all the fears started to come in. I've got to make a phone call, it gets confusing, it's never straightforward. Um, what's the actual experience going to be like? I know it's not very comfortable to have that done. I had a really bad experience in hospital last year. And so I was quite worked up about making the phone call. And the reason I posted was because I had a really good experience. I phoned up, I got through straight away, which is miracle number one with trying to get through to the NHS. The woman who answered was really lovely, was like, yeah, absolutely, we can change the date, no problem. Put the date in. And then I kind of built up the courage to say, also, by the way, I am neurodivergent, I'm autistic ADHD. I don't know how I'm going to respond to this appointment. I don't know if I'm going to be quite overwhelmed by what's going to have to be done. Um, I'm not sure why I'm telling you really, but I just feel like I need you to know so that someone can know in advance that I might find it a bit difficult. I mean, I might find it easy, right? But then
Okay.
again, I might not.
So this
And I've
this I mean,
never
just
really, yeah,
so
go.
I was just going to say that in itself sounds like an unusual step for you to have taken.
Yes. So it's always been like you don't want to look like the pain in the ass. You don't want to look like the person who is trying to get extra sympathy or like special treatment. Um, are they going to think that, XYZ, I'm, stupid or, start being patronizing or all of these different things. And it was a decision, it was like a hard fought decision to actually go ahead and go, just so you know, I might find this difficult. Um, so yeah, unusual for me to do that, but I am trying to step into those things a bit more
Okay.
because if I'm doing the work I'm doing, but I'm not stepping into those things, then I'm being a hypocrite in the work I'm doing, right? So
Okay. So there's a connection with like your personal journey into this and then what you're trying to help and enable in others.
absolutely,
What
yeah.
what um what was her response then, and why was that, or why did that feel so positive to you?
There was no questioning.
Okay.
There was no kind of like, oh, why are you telling us what, that's just, you just have to suck it up, basically. She just was like, well, thanks for letting me know. Would you like the appointment to be longer? Would that be helpful? So that if you get a bit overwhelmed, you can take a bit more time. And I was just like, I really don't know. I'm just letting you know that I might find it difficult because I thought it'd be helpful somehow. So she sort of said, well, it's a half an hour all told in terms of arriving and kind of settling in. This is where it will be. She kind of described it all. Um, and just said, look, if you want it to be a longer appointment, that's fine. But if you think that'll be enough time, that's also fine. Um, and I really want to reassure you that you can do this. You'll be okay and you'll be supported. It was that simple. But the fact was, there was no weird questioning. There was no doubt. There was no, what are you trying to get out of us? It was just very simply, can we encourage you? Can we give you a bit of an extra time? Can we do various things to be helpful? And that
Okay.
was it.
So
Yeah.
so I'm imagining that a lifetime of masking in these kind of
Mhm.
environments would have meant historically you may have just masked again,
Yeah.
acted as if you may not have any issues with this, which you may not, but you would have never have put yourself forward. And that masking build up the closer you get to the actual event would mean that at the point in which you step through the doors, or before you even step through the doors, or before you even leave your house to get there, may have meant that the anxiety levels would be such that even leaving to go to that meeting may have felt like too much.
I mean, it's a bit of an interesting one for me because we're very well versed in my family with hospitals and stuff. We've all had
Right.
lots of major things. So I would have got there, but then that feeling of anxiety would have been there for sure. Or maybe I'm so used to masking, I don't even recognize how high the anxiety would
That
be.
he
I mean,
is.
I don't know,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
which is probably, the case. But if I'd have got really anxious there, I would have been working really hard to cover that up, and then would have just been really upset afterwards.
So what do you feel like the benefit of being open at this stage in the process? Like, what benefit are you gaining further down the line because of this one conversation?
I don't feel nervous about going because I've already stated that I
Yeah.
might struggle. So if I am struggling, I feel like I've already let them know, which means if I tell them and go, actually, can we just pause for a minute because I'm really struggling, they should already know that.
Okay.
That could be a possibility. So it gives me permission,
Yeah.
which lowers the anxiety in the first place.
Yeah.
Her response has made me feel safe to go because I'll be heard if I am struggling.
There are two benefits that are being played out here. One is an internal feeling of I've been able to communicate and now I can step in knowing that information is out there. The second one that feels a really important piece is how the nurse first responded to you when you did open up to her. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't patronizing, it wasn't disbelieving, it wasn't checking whether it was true. It was just like, okay, cool. How can we accommodate you?
Mm.
And it hasn't made any difference to their process.
Yeah.
This is the important thing about a lot of accommodations. It's not made any difference to them. And so I think it makes it easier all round. And it was very simple. And so I think that's where it plays into a lot of the work that I do, because I think a lot of times people are fearful of what reasonable adjustments or reasonable accommodations will mean. And quite often they're very simple. And by
Okay.
making a few simple steps, it makes everything easier. Whereas not making a few simple steps then makes things more complicated and becomes a bigger issue.
So you've touched on the work and what you do, and I'm wondering kind of how, from your felt experience in this, putting on your trainer hat, what does it
Mhm.
feel like this particular nurse that took your call? What process have they been through in that kind of training thing of how she has gone through it that other people could benefit from understanding?
If I
How
was
that
if I was
felt?
going to tell somebody the best way to, she listened without prejudice. She had a compassionate curiosity because she asked questions, but they weren't judging questions. They were like, okay, that's cool. How can we help you? She was like really affirming and encouraging. I'm sure you'll be fine, but this is what we can do to help you. She described the situation ahead of time. Yeah, and it was just respectful listening and believing.
Excellent. What can you do with businesses that can take their staff through a process that enables them to be at the same point as this particular nurse that you encountered? Because presumably, when you look at it, any business that encounters clients, kind of people from the outside of the business coming in and interacting with them, the business is going to benefit from having frontline staff that can respond in this way. What do you offer that can bring people into this?
I think it is really important to trust when people say they need support and believe them. But human nature is such that we want to understand.
Okay.
And so, what I can bring is the knowledge that helps people understand the reality of what these issues are for people. what neurodivergent conditions actually mean. And with understanding, there's less fear of what the impact can be on the business, for example. It's easier to then just listen to somebody and trust them because you have a bit of knowledge already. And enabling people to recognize perhaps their own responses when you start to self-reflect. What are my biases that I don't even recognize? What changes do I need to make in my attitude? What learning can I sort of bring into how I work? But it's there presented quite simply because I've done the work to bring the knowledge. You haven't got to sit and research and figure things out. I've done a lifetime of being neurodivergent and then unpacking that. I've done many years in safeguarding and unpacking that. I'm putting the two together with my lived experience and my knowledge. And then in terms of, say, the neurodiversity in the workplace package that I offer, I've done 50 hours of CPD training to be able to deliver that on top of all of my lived experience.
Right.
So I've done the work and I bring it in and go, look, here it is.
Yeah.
This is the knowledge that you need. This is the understanding. This is where you need to be challenged. This is where you need to be understood. This is how you can change. These are the simple things you can do. And it's there, kind of ready to go.
Sure.
Not tick box, not easy, but presented simply so that you can learn and you can make changes.
One of the things that stood out to me in that was the question, why? So quite often, if somebody would go, I need this, a natural instinct reaction would be to go, well, why do you need that? Because they're trying to understand that situation. You bringing in that understanding so that the question why is answered before the interaction means that they can hear the interaction and go, so what does that look like for you? Rather than having to dig into, well, why do you need that? Why do you want extra time? Why do you want this stuff? Is they can go, okay, so you're neurodivergent. I understand the why of why this might be important to you.
Yes. No, and that's exactly the point, because it's exhausting if you're having to advocate for yourself and then explain what it all means all the time. If someone comes in with they've broken their leg, they're on crutches, they go, I need some help. They're stood there with crutches, it's really obvious, right?
Yeah.
When it's a neurodivergent condition or it's an unseen disability, it's exhausting to have to kind of go, well, no, genuinely, I do have the thing, and this is what it means, and blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? And you'll spend your whole time having to talk about essentially things you struggle with, which can be very negative for you anyway. And so if someone has some understanding, if they've gone through some training, the training that I offer, preferably, and they have an understanding, they're not picking that bit apart. They're just going, oh, right, okay, cool. Let's just see what accommodates you. And it feels more respectful. It feels more humanizing. It feels more inclusive because it's just an accepted thing. Okay, you have that thing.
And this is beyond the kind of front line and rest of world, right? This isn't just down to, and I think quite often a lot of conversations around especially safeguarding is like, how can we safeguard our clients? How can we safeguard the people who interact with us? And that idea of safeguarding is safeguarding not just from the kind of physical, emotional, mental harm that they may be experiencing, but safeguarding them as a whole person. And so that's where the neurodiversity piece comes into safeguarding. And we've had that conversation multiple times. But then this stuff that you're talking about is not therefore just for clients, customers, outside world interacting. This is an internal system as well. This is about staff, peers, line management, contract workers, senior management. This is everybody, top to bottom, whole systemic thinking, as we've talked about.
Oh, absolutely, because it can be very difficult to be providing that for clients or the people you're caring for when it's not being provided for you. That can be incredibly draining. Those are the kinds of things that lead to a sense of unfairness, burnout, emotional trauma. I know trauma gets thrown around a lot, but there is a lot of trauma in all of this. So I've seen many, many times in my own working history and in the history of other people, working for an organization that does an incredible job front facing. And I'm talking, working with abused people, I'm talking about, like really serious stuff. But internally, people aren't being treated the same.
Yeah.
And actually what's happening internally is not reflective of the service that's being provided. And so you have a whole raft of people who are going through and coming out the other end mangled up emotionally, mentally, and really struggling with employment because what's on the outside isn't matching what's happening internally.
Right.
And actually that really, really matters because it matters to the people who are experiencing that, who are working in those, those organizations. I personally have experienced some really difficult, tricky situations, which have led to burnouts and real health issues.
Yeah.
It's brought me to a point of going, I don't want to work for anybody again. That, it's too much. So it matters from the point of view of the individual people who are in there experiencing it. It matters to the organisation because they have this conveyor belt of people going through. They're missing out on what those people can really bring. They're spending money on re-recruitment. They're spending money, if you're going to get down to the money, on time off sick, all of those different things. And actually, reputationally, people are speaking out more. And so people are seeing the hypocrisy of working well with clients or your front-facing people and treating your staff badly.
Yeah.
And that's being believed more by people as well. And certainly one of my major experiences, as I came out of that organisation, I then was discovering other people from all sorts of different departments who had the same story.
Right. So it
Right the
wasn't
way
just
through
your
the whole
experience,
no,
it was a systemic
it was
experience.
systemic.
Yeah.
It was systemic.
Yeah.
And people are starting to be more open about it. And I certainly know people who, because this was a charitable organisation, who stopped giving to that charity having heard what had happened to me, for example. I wasn't going around saying to people, you can't give to that charity anymore. But there were some people who gave regularly, were like, absolutely not.
Right.
I'm not supporting a system that chews up and spits out its employees while they're trying to do fantastic frontline work.
Yeah.
So it's
The
damaging all
effect
round.
is, yeah, it has an effect on the way that the whole organization is viewed, or it can do. And that's nowadays, when perception is everything, it's really important that you're not just putting a veneer on stuff, that it actually does what it says that it should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's not just like from the top, this is who we are. It's actually training everybody in between, that they actually know the language, that they actually know what accommodation means, that they actually know what asking why does to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing of it is, the thing that is frustrating, is hard to see, is that actually it's not that complicated.
Mm.
If you've got people who can come in with the knowledge to train people, it's not like hours and hours of training and loads of big changes. It's really not actually that complicated. It really boils down to listening and believing. There's obviously lots of nuances and lots of things to learn, but we're not talking investing in so many hours of training that the actual output of an organization is ruined.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? It's not like, right, we all
Yeah.
need to go away on a boot camp for 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, but it can make such a massive difference.
And it's the rudder effect, isn't it? It's like it doesn't take
Yes,
much of a movement in the rudder to steer the course of a ship in a completely different direction. It's these
exactly.
smaller things that make a massive difference to
Yeah,
organizations internally, what it's like to work, what it's like to connect with their clients and customers, and what it's like for the internal experience of staff and managers in there.
yeah, yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely.
Okay, Gabriella, let's leave it there. I think that's been a really
Yes.
good. Obviously, people know how to get in touch with you by,
Mhm.
wherever this has been shared. There'll be a link somewhere on wherever that is that they can
Yes,
connect and reach out. And I know that you are just up for having conversations with anybody
absolutely.
to start that journey for anyone, any organization that they're on, because it's about doing it with people who know what they're talking about, know what the experience is like, and can walk people through to a really good place of understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Totally up for conversations for sure.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
Good chatting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cheers. Okay. Bye bye.